Welcome back to The Night Shift, your safe space for talking about UFOs, UAPs, NHI, disclosure, and what it all means for you, me, and everyone else. It's a strange time to be alive. We live in interesting times, that's for sure. We have an extra special guest for you tonight. I'm so excited. We're going to be talking to Reed Summers in just a few moments. Reed is someone who has thought very deeply about what it is that the NHI might actually be up to and how we should start thinking about that. What should our response be? And how do we know? How can we tell, what's going on? What can we observe? So we're going to get into that with Reed. We also have our panel with us tonight. I'm going to introduce them now. Pavel, host of the smash hit Psychoactivo podcast, is with us. Pavel, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you guys?
You're the toast of YouTube. Good to see you. And Dan Cleary, host of Others from Another Mother, is with us. Dan, how are you?
Not a smash hit, but I'm doing good. Thank you so much.
the smash hit. And of course, producer Xander Jones is with us as well. How are you, Xander?
I'm doing good.
And Xander has a quick announcement. Do you want to tell him now, or should we save it for the end? It's really good.
Whatever you think. It's your show.
I'd say now, so people can start.
Let's do it now, so people have a second.
Okay. Hey everyone. Been working with Clint since when? October last year. At this point.
Oh yeah, it's been a little while.
Also, sorry if you can hear a little fan in the background. It's quite a hot night tonight. And long may that partnership continue with the Night Shift, absolutely. But I've decided to set up my own YouTube channel. Going for like a slightly different vibe. We're going for sort of like the sort of thing you'd put on at bedtime. It's like the ASMR sleep story kind of thing, but it's all ufology, and we'll talk about consciousness and things like that as time goes on, but it's one of those kind of things. You put it on, you sit and relax. It's supposed to sound quite nice in your ears, and it's called the Dreamland Motel. So it's youtube.com/@thedreamlandmotel. I don't know if there anything else. The first episode came out an hour ago.
Just an hour ago,
and it's basically Bob Lazar from start to finish. It's not just his story, it's about his upbringing and all the way up to what he's doing with Project Gravatar. And it's just designed, you want to go to bed, but you don't want to stop with your ufology content. You slap it on, you put some nice headphones on, and just vibe out. And that's about it, really. I hope everyone enjoys it.
It's so well done, and I just want to say to people, go there, listen to it, subscribe. I think I was like your 12th or 13th subscriber when I went there after you launched the channel. It's excellent, so I highly recommend it, guys. That's the one of the many top secret projects you're working on.
Yeah, there's one more, two more, but that one will do for now. That should sort you for the next month.
Did you say the name of the channel yet?
Yes, so it's at the Dreamland Motel on YouTube, and we're also the same on all the other socials and stuff. So if you search for me on all the socials with just the Dreamland Motel, I should show up. But bearing in mind, right now I've got 15 subscribers, so might not be the top result, but we'll get there.
You're going to have 20 by the end of the show for sure. Maybe even 25.
maybe.
And after today, after we wrap the show today, I think we're going to bounce over to the Discord and do another follow-up chat to kind of just a little more casual there as well, and we can talk about Dreamland as well, and anything else you guys want to get into. Thanks, Xander. So our guest is Reed Summers, who is an investigator, host of the EMERGENT Podcast, and creator of the new digital platform Forerunner, a place for truth-seeking pioneers who are navigating the front lines of the UFO UAP phenomenon and our human engagement with non-human intelligence. His body of work sheds light on the activities and behaviors of the non-human intelligences present in our world and seeks to develop our human capability to understand their nature and origin as well as their motivations and intentions for direct involvement with the human species. His free course, Decoding Alien Intent, along with his forthcoming book, equip people with key information, insights, and practical tools for understanding the activities and behaviors of NHI and how we, as a species, respond. Reed Summers, welcome back to the show. It's been a little while. How are you?
It's good, Clint. Good to see you and good to be back.
I'm so excited that you're here. I think that this conversation isn't had nearly enough. It's long overdue, and you're one of the only people. In fact, you're the only person I know of that's seriously having this conversation and looking at the threat potential, the dangers, the peril, as well as the possible promise of contact with NHI to set the table for people who aren't familiar with your work. How would you characterize this particular moment that we're in the grand timeline of ufology? What is different now than maybe 10, 20 years ago?
Right. Well, I hate to be the only one, by the way, and so I hope to bring others into this conversation, which to me it's logical, it's instinctual, and it's also grounded in the observational record that we should be talking about intent and the potential that a hostile element of NHI is operating in the world, which you can see indicated in numerous experiencer accounts, numerous official documentation about potential UAP altercations with the military. So it's totally logical and reasonable to be talking about this. So welcome on in, everyone. Yeah, I believe in the last, since 2017, the 3 Navy videos, Lou Elizondo stepping forward, ATIP, OSAP coming into the public awareness. I think what we're seeing is some effort from within the former or current programs within the U.S. government investigating UAP, potentially engaging in crash recovery efforts, possibly reverse engineering, to step forward and inform the public due to some set of undisclosed exigencies. There are hard realities, as Lou has described it, behind this phenomenon. And there is some unknown timeline or some set of provoking events that are forcing this out into the public. And I think I have a sense of what that might be. We'll get into that. What is the alien agenda? What is the human agenda? But we're seeing credible individuals who had firsthand or secondhand access to information related to these programs stepping on the record, into the public record, and speaking into the congressional record. We're seeing these data dumps like Immaculate Constellation, Matthew Brown, and others stepping forward. It's really unprecedented. This is being again triggered by external exigencies, but it's also being triggered by a combination of other factors. A few good men, absolutely. I think there's also a variety of factions with differing agendas at play to bring this out in different ways to different degrees. And then we're seeing some maybe break for cover, who have had liability due to their personal participation in these programs, stepping forward, possibly to indemnify themselves and to come forward as a voice of disclosure, so that they are not painted as a voice of the cover-up. I kind of jokingly put on Twitter when I saw the Age of Disclosure documentary announcement with Clapper, right from the age of the cover-up, right from the age of cover-up to the age of disclosure, right? So, interesting to see individuals who were involved coming out pro-disclosure. So I think there's a number of, quote, forcings, to take the climate atmospherics terminology, a number of forcings that are causing this atmospheric shift in the nature of the UFO conversation.
Why do you think it is that people are it seems very obvious that people are nervous around this topic. Like there's a lot of weird, nervous laughter around it when they get right down to the nitty gritty about, well, what are these craft actually doing? Particularly with the fighter pilots who are, being followed by these things or encountering them when they're training. And it seems like the conversation always stops short of, so what does this mean? Like, what do we actually do about it? How do you jump that gap from what we see to what your conclusion is?
I would argue that there is a powerful field of force field, kind of enshrining this topic and keeping people from going too far, too deep in their assessment, to the point where they could actually possibly accurately understand some aspects, for example, the hostile element, like I said, there's something that doesn't want people quite yet to go there. And I also think there's also an impasse internally. I mean, we all want to think on the positive side of life. It's uncomfortable to be faced with a truth like that. And then, of course, it compels one to respond. Like, you can't just know about that and then go back to the UFO news cycle. You would have to possibly take a position. And we can talk about, what does it mean to go from exploration of the UFO phenomenon to responding to the UFO phenomenon? What does citizen activism look like, not just around government secrecy, but potential NHI secrecy and activity on the ground? So I think we're pressing up against that tender nerve. I think we're going to burst through in the next several years. That's my sense. What do I do to jump the gap? I'm somewhat of an outsider to ufology. I've not been speaking on the circuit. I am not newly aware of this or involved, but I am newly publicly communicating more concertedly about it. So I've just kind of gotten into the fight. I'm thinking with my own left and right brain and using whatever capabilities I have to think through the phenomenon, using, again, reason, logic, caution, responsibility to the human species. And as I do that, and as I look at the phenomena associated with UAP and potential NHI, as I look at these nuclear incursions, these altercations with military, this tampering with military systems, some of them in flight, causing, in some cases, actual crashes and the death of the pilots. As I look at altercations with first responders on the ground, which actually have happened, that most people don't know have happened. As I look at the physical encounters, the non-consensual encounters, potential forced medical experimentation upon people who are engaged non-consensually. As I look at the missing peoples phenomenon, right? So there are hundreds of thousands of missing people presently in this country alone. Now, of course, most are due to a variety of human criminal activity or just other aspects of society. But is there the potential that the abduction phenomenon has a linkage to the missing peoples phenomenon, which also has a linkage to the redeposited peoples phenomenon, which is to say people found in nature, deceased, exhibiting signs of bizarre medical examination, excisement, that are similar to the animal mutilation phenomenon, which has been reported for decades. So we have this anomalous activity on the ground. We don't know to what extent it correlates to UAP, let alone NHI beyond it, because not all UAP correlates to NHI. But I think what we have are numerous indicators, wealth of testimonial evidence that we could use to shape our investigations, which is what I'm presently doing. That's my other wheelhouse, is getting into the investigation of this phenomenon on the ground, in the field, targeted in ways that actually use the wealth, the hundreds of thousands of UAP reports that are already publicly available. Newfork, Kufos, MUFON, Humcat, Rosales. There are hundreds of thousands of data points right there. AI may be the death of the UFO video, right? Or the UFO podcaster, as we were joking about before the show. But it could be the godsend for pattern recognition of the existing data sets so that we can say, okay, instead of just pointing telescopes up at a patch of the sky above Harvard, right? Or just wheeling around along the coastal highway hoping we see something, why don't we go to locations that have the highest preponderance of UAP activity, map that on top of locations, demographics, populations that have the highest reporting of NHI encounters, and go figure out what's going on there through both technological, testimonial means. So there's a lot we can do. There's actually a lot more we can do than just sit around waiting for the Pentagon and hoping that our feed, when we refresh it on Twitter, has a juicy nugget from a former government official. Like this is a setup, I believe. This is part, we are being parked, right, at the edge of a parking lot that is, level 7, Pentagon, outer wing, furthest walk to the front door, saying, line up, folks, park yourselves here for 30 years. We'll give you scraps out of the back gate. When really citizen activism, citizen science, UAP detection and tracking, they're all within our reach. The tools there. There's actually companies and startups and academic groups that are already out in the field revolutionizing our ability to detect and monitor. So that when there is another New Jersey drone flap, we don't just wait around for CNN to tell us what's going on or the press secretary for the then president. It's like, no, we go out and figure out if they're lying or not. Right.
That's such a great point. And you kind of describe yourself as a UFO activist, I guess you could say, in the sense that, as a regular person who's kind of been switched on to this and you started to investigate it yourself, looking into the darker aspects of the phenomenon. You just mentioned abductions and mutilations, which are kind of the third rail, for sure, the fringe of the fringe in this community. And I don't think that's an accident. I think that's been engineered that way. And then you said something that was pretty interesting about how we're being parked sort of here. Where this is some kind of maybe a media play to get us to look one way while something else is happening. Can you explain a little bit more about how you view that? What's going on right now?
For sure. I mean, I think, the obfuscation tactics, the disinformation programs that have been underway for decades are still at play. We are still being led into what is potentially a false authority syndrome, where only hard evidence can prove the phenomenon to most people. And therefore, that's all we need. That's all we can rely upon. And gosh darn it, who has all of that hard evidence? They do. And so there is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy at work there that creates an impasse. And basically what happens is, because we can't generate enough hard evidence to convince a majority, we wait around for those who might prefer it, or we do the FOIA request approach. All good efforts. Don't mean to cast aspersions. And there are good people coming out of government with important information. And I don't mean to say that they're part of that disinformation circuitry. But I think to the degree, maybe this is self-imposed by ufology upon itself. Maybe it's long-standing, well-engineered over many decades. But basically, we operate in this eddy in the larger river of society, right? We speculate and theorize. And then, of course, to gain airtime on the UFO entertainment circuit, you have to theorize bigger, better, harder, wilder than the last guy. And this is the Gaia syndrome, right? Mm-hmm. The Gaia TV syndrome, right? And so, and then of course the public looks at that eddy and says, heck no, I'm not stepping into that. I don't want to waste my time and energy. That looks like a circus. And it has been a circus. Now that's changing. There's way more credible people. There's more credible theorizing going on, but still the eddy can still, kind of entrap us and prevent us from getting down the road of assessing the phenomenon and its intent, which I would say is well within our reach already. Like, if we can't use the evidence we have over 80 years, 100,000 data points, new fork, then what are we going to do with more evidence, right? We're still not capable of starting assessment, leading to working conclusion, iterated by field research and further inquiry. So this is my work. This is my course. Forerunner is about kickstarting this two-stroke engine in the minds of each of us, but in the UFO crowd, to say, let's empower ourselves. Let's not empower the very entities that have been in power on this issue. Let's let them confirm or corroborate the findings of society, and let's go figure this out in society. And to the degree we can do that, I think that also unleashes or unlocks some of what has bound up the national security state in disclosing this issue. Because if they're the ones who are going to provoke a societal awareness awakening to UFO, NHI, cosmic realities, exoplanetary systems, interspecies contact, right? The whole exosystemic interaction of life. Okay, then that's going to trigger the whole religious rethink about human origins, human centrality with God. If the deep state or the national security apparatus is the one to provoke that, they're the wrong people. They're out of their league. And they know it. And you hear this all the time from people who have had access to that world, like Lou, like Carl Nell, David Grush, others who are basically calling for society and religions to begin to think through these realities, so that government isn't burdened with the task of onboarding humanity, one government, the US government, to the reality of life. So society really does need to be, I think, the first and hardest push forward. And I think it's possible.
I want to dig a little deeper on this, but before we go there, I just want to remind anyone who's watching, if you're watching at home or playing the home game, you can go to our Discord and place your questions. If you've got questions for Reed or for the panel and you want to drop those in the live questions channel on the Discord server, you can do that. And then we'll be checking that throughout the show to see what you guys want to know. So yeah, just go through on Discord. You'll see under live streams, there's live questions. You can pop in there and drop your questions in there or in the chat here as well. So Reed, I think it seems pretty reasonable to assume that, as you said, there are many different types of NHI that are operating. That we've seen all kinds of different types of craft, and people have reported seeing different types of beings. Most recently, who was it at the hearing that just said that there were like 4 or 5 different types that they were aware of?
Eric Davis.
Eric Davis.
Eric Davis. It's just the other day. It's starting to get to a point where we're hearing this more and more. But it's not all good or all bad. How do we know what we should be concerned about? Like, what types of threats are on your mind? What types of dangers? What types of risks are you thinking about?
Yeah. And I like to go in that sequence, but in reverse, risk, hazard or danger, and then threat. Because, risk is inherent to the phenomenon. The risk could be a miscalculation between nuclear superpowers because one of them thinks the other is disabling each other's nuclear warheads. There were no fewer than, I believe, 7 near nuclear war triggering incidents during the Cold War due to a combination of technician error, system failure, birds, radar malfunction. So having UAP hover above nuclear facilities disable warheads or enable warheads, as happened in 1982 in the former Soviet Ukraine, putting them into launch sequence, right? Activity like this presents tremendous risk without even accounting for intent or threat. So I think there's tremendous risk we need to assess. As for taking a step in, danger or hazard can ensue from good intentions on both parties. And so what are the most hazardous potential aspects of the phenomenon? Well, I think we need to go and look at its activity around sensitive sites, sensitive military installations, its engagement with military personnel, equipment, aircraft carriers, planes, submarines, etc., because that activity does have the potential to cause a miscalculation and some kind of human reaction. Ryan Graves has talked about the safety of flight hazard, in that some of these UAP encounters in the air have caused near misses with civilian airliners with hundreds of civilian passengers. South Africa, for example, a UFO passed within like hundreds of feet, several hundred feet of a civilian airliner when the safe flight distance is 10 times that probably. He actually shared this account in his opening remarks at the Soul Foundation conference last November. Serious safety of flight issue, which could down a civilian airliner, right? There are other altercations in the air. There have been attempted shoot downs of UAP by military craft, with the military craft instrumentation failing, the craft almost crashing in coming out of Russia via George Knapp, reportedly 45 altercations in the air, causing several jets to crash and the death of their pilots. Okay, so that's that layer. And then the layer down is at the civilian level. Recent SCU, Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies research, shows that the civilian engagement might have kicked up into a higher gear in the late 60s. Prior to that, it was mostly a military fixation. Encounters or sightings were reported during the daylight hours at a distance, and then began this nighttime close approach to more civilian areas and civilian potential targets. So, what is that about? Now, I think if we want to understand the intent of the phenomenon, well, a few things. I first want to back out and just say there are multiple intents at play in all probability. Those intents might be in competition with one another. We might be in something of a crowded field, right? We have been living with an island mentality. It's just us humans on our little island, our little beautiful planet of Earth. Well, these entities are probably coming from a continental reality, which is to say they are accustomed to inter-civilizational interaction, collaboration, competition, conflict, deal-making, subversive activity, etc. So, we might think very simplistically, well, they're either here to hurt us or they're here to save us, good or bad, one or the other. They haven't hurt us, they haven't destroyed us, so they must be here to help us. I hear it all the time. This is island life thinking right here. We need to think continentally, which is When an entity wants to enact their intent, could be out of their self-interest, could be a collaborative interest, win-win, or it could be a purely detrimental, hostile interest, which is to take down another player or force. These entities have probably had thousands, tens of thousands, or longer time period to perfect whatever strategies are most effective in a highly technological environment where technological parity might exist, such that you can't just, gain the upper hand by inventing some new form of energy extraction. It's already been done, right? So maybe there are forms of influence that are enacted more subtly through long-term observation of another species and the engineering of communications that utilize their data set, for example. Oh,
Yeah.
and guess what? We have AI now, which is already scooped up and is using our data set, presumably on our behalf. Could it be used on another's behalf, right? Could these
Yeah.
technologies either have been introduced or spurred in their development, hastened by other entities that want to see us be able to connect, plug in to their exosystemic technosphere? So I think, but going back to my point about the civilian side, I think going right to that most intimate point of contact, where is reported NHI engaging with living men, women, and children, and what happens? What is the characteristic profile of the encounter, of the entity, and of the activity? And if we can understand that, we're understanding the deepest penetration into our world that might then reverse explain some of the more superficial activity in the air, in the ocean, etc.
I want to ask you about well, there's a viewer question I want to get to first, and then I'll circle back on this. But we have a question from our Discord, and again, if you want to drop a question in the Discord, go to our Discord server, and you can go to under live streams. There's a channel for live questions. You can drop it there. This one comes from CJ, the alien guy. He says, Reed, do you believe or think that the secrecy behind UAP might be a part of the NHI agenda and not ours? Or perhaps part of an agreement that's part of the reason for secrecy? I heard Eric Weinstein.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed that last part of an agreement, he said?
Yeah, like in other words, are NHI, do you think NHI are possibly working with maybe our deep state people to like maintain this secret cover up for their ends? Like in other words, are we collaborating? Right. Do we have human collaborators working with NHI? I hope I got that interpretation of your question.
Yeah, big question. I always want to account for the nuance and the complexity of the picture. There's over 170 nation states in this world. I believe there are dozens of crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs. I think if there have been interactions, it's with multiple state actors, certainly all foreign superpowers and our own. If there have been agreements and collaborations, logical to assume something similar. So it's a complex field. Do I think the secrecy around UAP is in part due to NHI secrecy or intent to be secret? I think that's a very logical conclusion to make. They, across all their behavior, have chosen to reveal themselves to us very selectively. There have been mass displays of presence, and there have been numerous accounts of covert activity, possibly even cloaking efforts, definitely efforts to evade detection and kinetic engagement. Also, there have been kinetic engagements potentially initiated by UAP, not just by military. So, but suffice it to say that, yes, I think there's a longstanding, truly clear picture that whatever is behind UAP, the intelligence behind these potential craft, does not want to be broadly known by human society, does not want to be understood sufficient that we can devise intelligent strategies to either intercept or to force some kind of negotiating settlement regarding their activity in the world. They do not appear to want that. Now, some would say, well, they're waiting for us to get ready. The government, the Collins elite, the stalwarts, the power-hungry humans in power aren't going to allow us access to their reality, their technology, their federations and trade groups or what have you. And so the NHI are in the wings waiting for us to get ready for them. I don't think that's a plausible explanation, especially when you look at the observational phenomena. There have been efforts by the government, and we're seeing one now, to bring this to the public awareness. There are reasons, probably good ones, why that has not been readily possible. I think the nature of the phenomenon, its intent, what it has done with the civilian population, certain agreements that were made, could be a reason why this is so difficult to bring into the public, the hard truth behind the reality of the phenomenon. So back to agreements and involvements, we don't know. We don't know the nature of how deep and how broadly this presence has permeated our world and at what levels of our civilization, institutionally. So have there been sit downs with government? Well, the Greada Treaty, Eisenhower, beware the military industrial complex. There's a lot of, hearsay and some testimonial indications that sit downs did take place. Colonel Philip Corso, his statement that we had to basically relent to their presence because we could not match them technologically, and we made or brokered an agreement to give them access to the population in limited ways, in ways that would not harm anyone, but that would transfer technologies of high impact into the U.S. government setting. Is that true? Lynn Buchanan, remote viewer.
Feels true.
Lynn Buchanan with Linda Moulton Howe, I believe it was, stating that in his remote viewing for covert programs, this is not armchair, residential level remote viewing. This is employed remote viewing for defense agencies. He saw extraterrestrial entities working alongside humans in black military sites multiple times, multiple morphologies of entities. So what does that mean? What is the nature of this collaboration? In my mind, this is responsible speculation territory. Like, we don't know. And I would push back on someone that says, it's not time to talk about this. There's not enough evidence out there to talk about this. I've heard that pushback. Yeah. Okay. And it's like, yeah, but then you're sending us right back into the UFO eddy, right? You're re-empowering the power brokers who have the hard evidence, and you're preventing us from responsibly speculating at the frontiers of what is known. Because if we can responsibly speculate and devise research questions that would begin to penetrate these unknowns, we could actually gain hard insight. And we can get into what I mean by that. There's actually real things I mean by that, but I don't want to go too deep.
I want to dig into that, and I've got another question from the community I want to get to. But before we go to the community question, I'm curious. There's been speculation on all sides about what this Skywatcher group, Jake Barber's group, Skywatcher, is up to. Are they on the up and up? Are they on our side? Are they working for somebody? Is it part of a psyop? And I don't think anyone's really, been able to crack that case just yet. What is your sense? You mentioned earlier this type of, we kind of jokingly on the show call it garage band ufology, or Mythbusters ufology, where we try to do it on our own, ground up. Right. That appears to be what they're doing. Do you get that sense that they're legit, or do you feel like that's part of a larger campaign to maybe manipulate the way we see this?
I think there is a larger campaign. We'll just put that on the table. Okay. I don't think this is just a few good men, right? Breaking cover and going out and shaking hands with the public and saying, I'm one of y'all. I'm one of you all now, right? Yeah. So there is a concerted effort to bring out certain aspects of this phenomenon to the public. I don't think there's only one. I think there's multiple factions engaged in that. And so what are the compelling reasons? I wouldn't be surprised if some of the reasons are that crimes have been committed, that those who break cover now will be indemnified later, that if we can bring out technology, exotechnologies, into a limited hangout, that those can then be accessed by certain companies and research groups in ways that would either be highly profitable, that would potentially bring revolutionary cutting edge insights into the public for a variety of reasons, one of which also may be to gain greater levels of technological parity with the phenomenon. Like, there's only so far the military can go in kinetically engaging this phenomenon in defensive or offensive action without the public knowing. Now, were we seeing that in the drone flap of last November, when there were reportedly drone-like craft chasing off orb-like craft, and vice versa? Are we seeing an NHI proxy war in the sky? Are we seeing a U.S. government hot conflict with NHI factions? There are a mounting number of claims as to regarding the latter of that, of those scenarios. So, I'll go right to Harold Malmgren. Actually, I'll go to Skywatcher and then I'll go to Harold Malmgren because there's a lot to unpack there. But as far as I can see, Skywatcher is out there using the tools that they have developed with psionic operators from former government programs. actively trying to detect this phenomenon on behalf of society. Will they present that data full transparency? We'll see. They seem to be. There's some pretty eye-popping information, photo, video coming out. James Fowler, who I believe is director of Skywatcher or director of science and technology, I'm not sure. His interview with Jesse Michaels, basically speaking right on the camera about being hit by a direct energy weapon, about variety of attempts to engage NHI. I'm sorry, UAP, not necessarily NHI. And putting out the morphologies of the craft. I think it's great. We need that taxonomy. We don't understand the scorecard of this contest.
What do you
Yeah.
just, if I can, and sorry to interrupt you, but what do you make of they've identified 9 different categories of craft that they characterize based on what performance characteristics they see. And it's interesting because we've talked about it on this show that it seems like none of the 9 types of craft they identified look like a flying saucer. And not that they should all look like flying saucers, but it seems like for 60, 70 years we've been hearing about flying saucers, and then suddenly that is not really brought up anymore. It's orbs, it's all of these jellyfish.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? I'm just curious.
Well, if you want to check out lesson 4 of my course on decoding alien intent, I look at patterns and trends in reported UAP shape, activity, and to some degree geographical appearance. And I begin to try to detect certain patterns in that historical data set. Now, one good data point in that data set is that the preponderance of saucer-shaped craft tapered off many decades ago. Cigar-shaped craft as well. And now what we see, also black triangles peaked, I believe, in the 90s or early 2000s, blanking on that, but it's in my course if you want to check it out. I basically go through, I believe, 5 different research papers and initiatives that have looked across the New Fork database for patterns and trends. That we are seeing more orbs, spheroids, luminous objects. Could that be because some have surmised that those are essentially drone craft of a larger inhabited or operated craft by an entity? So are we seeing a pullback from the airspace by large structured craft and the insertion of small, harder to detect, potentially cloakable craft? I can only speculate. But it is certain that the reported shape and kinematic activity of these craft has changed over the decades. I also think the reverse engineering efforts probably have delivered us to the point, not us, them, those who are behind those efforts, to developing a true ARV that is able to mimic UAP craft and, of course, do everything else that they would want to do with that. There's also indications that UAP have mimicked human craft, human-looking craft.
Yeah.
So this thing of mimicry, it's interesting.
Well, that's like the drone thing in New Jersey. That's what everyone was suggesting, was that they were trying to look like drones, but they it's just
right.
Blinky lights, but they're not the right kind of blinky lights. It doesn't, it didn't make any sense, that whole narrative about they were, Chinese drones, or why would they have blinking lights on them? It doesn't make sense.
As I looked at that, the red light was flashing on my dashboard saying manufactured crisis. Someone is trying to manufacture a crisis for definitely the incoming administration, but also the existing national security apparatus. So who benefits from the ambiguity regarding the source of those reported craft and their activity in the sky? I don't think the administration would. I can't imagine military 3-letter agencies would. I can't imagine defense companies would. And then you go to like Russia, China. Would they benefit from putting all these up? I mean, it's tantamount to an act of war, right? And
unless you're a defense company that manufactures drone technology that you want to take down.
Why would you put that in public purview? Why would you air it all out in the public skies, 6 p.m. rush hour? Well,
you create the threat, and then you say, well, I've got the tool to identify those drones and I can sell it to you.
Interestingly,
we've got just
though,
thing.
What came out is they were not able to.
Yeah. Despite
military,
unlimited budget and
Yeah. I mean, from what I heard, Lockheed and others brought their kit right to the vicinity and were unable to either jam these craft or effectively bring them down when attempting to do so. So it was a humiliating event for all human actors. So it begs you to question, well, is this an NHI generated psychological operation, possibly to undermine citizen faith in government? Because, of course, the incoming administration, this happened weeks before and weeks after they took office, they're not going to be able to credibly disclose what was going on. They may not even know. And so they have to kind of play it, kick the can, possibly tell some white lies or even worse. So now they're making themselves look bad to the public. The public wants answers. No one can give it. It generates a crisis of human on human, citizen to government authority. So, but back to Skywatcher. Yeah, no, I'm watching everything they put out closely. If they can, as they say they might intend to do or be able to do, to bring one of these craft in, to bring it within observational distance, to get it to the ground, to provide hard evidence to society outside the context of government agencies who have, of course, probably these direct energy microwave, high pulse weapons that can bring them down already, right? Well, that's not coming out to the public. But if there is an organization that can do so with CNN on the ground, camera crew ready, that would be a scenario
gets us to the next level for sure of this
that
thing,
breaks
right?
us through. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if I may, I don't know if now's the moment to talk about Harold Malmgren. But
Please.
or we can. Oh, okay. Well, I watched that interview with Jesse Michaels very closely. I was very surprised when he passed away days later. Of course, he was not in the best of health, and rest in peace. But some of the things he indicated mapped on top of other things I've heard reported years ago, and that strike at this question of either involvement or resistance and kinetic opposition. So I just want to highlight this claim that Harold Malmgren made, which is that let me fact check myself. Okay, yes, got the year straight. So 1962, the Bluegill triple prime nuclear test in the Johnston Atoll in the South Pacific, testing a high altitude detonation of a nuclear warhead, reportedly part of a long-standing series of nuclear tests to test our nuclear arsenal. According to Harold Malmgren, a number of things really took place. First, and least shocking of them all, a UFO UAP was detected in the fire plume of the detonation. It fell out of the sky. It was recovered. Okay, it was brought to Los Alamos. Okay, you could say, wow, well, that's the shocking revelation of that story, right? Not really, actually. Not only did JFK and Lyndon B. Johnson fly out to Los Alamos to get a report on the results of this test, really, they came potentially to get a report on the nature of the takedown of this UAP. Harold Malmgren said, I believe he said he was asked to personally handle the material from this craft. Okay, it gets a little wilder here, that he felt this thing communicated into his mind, might have actually put information into his mind. And he surmised that the individual who had him handle it only to test that potential connection. Again, the psionic capability of human beings to interact, not only with the entity, but with the craft. And the craft, by the way, have some reported to be semi-biological, right? They're not purely apart from the entity itself, right?
And
okay.
It's also not to just jump on this, but just to add to what you're saying, I think it's also worth mentioning that not only did it communicate with Malmgren according to his testimony, but it did so after being exploded in a nuclear blast. Like what was left of this thing still worked.
Right. Yes, this was wreckage. This was shards of metamaterial, one might presume. Right. Okay. Now we could go off on the JFK tangent and highlight the fact that it was several days or maybe 10 days, fact check me on that, after JFK sent a memorandum to the CIA requiring information and a report on the UAP phenomenon that he was killed. Okay, that's a whole rabbit hole that I think we might gain some insight into in the years to come. But back to the UAP takedown, Harold Malmgren says that this nuclear test was in part or in large part purposed as the test of a direct energy weapon to take down UAPs. That is actually what the test was. Now, we've heard other talk about the Reagan-era Star Wars program, right? Anti-satellite weapons, or I'm sorry, anti-ICBM.
There's in Israel, they have one called the Iron Beam.
Iron Dome, I think it is.
And then we've got Golden Dome. coming in
Well, I
the
think
US.
Iron Dome is the surface-to-air missile technology
Yeah.
and system. Golden Dome, however, seems to be a continuation of that Star Wars program. I have heard from people I find credible that the Star Wars program was actually highly purposed as a UAP takedown, a UAP disable, a strike disable, and shoot down program of some kind. So that we are testing. Just take this in for a moment. If true, right? It's unverified. Hopefully, we can gain greater verification. But if you take Harold Malmgren at his word, the US government is engaging in nuclear tests involving numerous Navy vessels, multiple three-letter agencies, massive organization on the ground among many military personnel to test a direct energy weapon purposed to take down UAP. Now, that to me just gives a sense of the scale and the scope of the kinetic, hot engagement that may already be taking place. And if that's true, you could say, well, it's just power-hungry humans that want to test weapons and weaponize UAP tech, and we're shooting down peace-loving beings in our first most beautiful contact event with another form of intelligence. I've heard it painted that way, okay, in the public. Or you could take a more 50-50 approach, which is there might be a reason to take these down. Maybe there's an attempt to gain either tech parity with a technological presence that has the ability to massively disrupt not only military systems but the operations of society, or to undermine the citizen government contract in some way. So or it might not be, it might be truly 50-50, which is this is somewhat defensive action, not just offensive action. There's actually a fight going on for the sky and for the ground, and that UAP are either provoking human actors, human military agencies, etc., or they are engaged in hostile activity that we're not aware of. It's not been disclosed to us. So I think this just sets the stage for how to potentially think about this interaction. I wouldn't say this is remote observation or incidental contact. They just glanced off the surface of our world, or a long-running science program where they just want to just put a little tag in the ear and let the animal, let the wildebeest roam the landscape and just watch it in its natural habitat. Don't do anything to it. I don't think we're there. I think we need to go deeper and really acknowledge this is an incursion. It is some sort of effort to involve itself in our human world, potentially alter our human world, our human bodies, our human genetics. We don't know yet, but it is down and in, not up and out.
I think that is something that the longer this goes on, people sort of suspect to be the case. As you spend more time with it, it's hard to imagine that it's all just love and light. And I think that there's certainly an effort to portray it that way. Certain people, of course, Stephen Greer has been very public about this, saying that there's no possible way there could be any danger coming from the NHI. It would just be us. That just doesn't feel very safe. It doesn't feel like common sense thinking to me, and I like your approach a little better, a lot better. I've got a question. Actually, I have a comment here from someone on our Discord here. This is a group. Are you familiar with the Hestin project? Hestin, am I saying?
Vaguely, only vaguely.
They are.
It's been mentioned to me. Yeah.
They are a group of researchers who have basically set up sensors around this hotspot in Hestin, and they observe all kinds of different phenomena. And one of our friends at Hestin just said in the comments here, Reed, we have a citizen science field trip planned at Project Hestin this September. We have 25 years of pictures and videos from automated anomaly detection systems, now upgraded to better cameras, 1 year with good quality cameras, planning AI to detect anomalies, working on more mobile stations for anomaly detection, planning a LoRa mesh network for sensors out in the mountains. Is this what you are asking for, right? Volunteer work, citizen science?
Yes, 100%. And the person who mentioned you to me, your organization to me, was in the context of a collaborative project that I'll be a part of initiating between UAP detection and tracking technology and research groups. So I'll be in touch. Let me just say that I am very impressed by these groups that are engaged in multi-sensor UAP detection, disclosing how they calibrate their equipment, what equipment they use, and that are open to working with other technology groups with different setups that can either do more precision detection or broad mesh detection, and mapping these data sets through data sharing, which I know is not what everyone likes to do in the UAP crowd. People like to data hoard. We need to be data sharing, centralized repository, research accessible, and begin to bring these limited resources together, to not cannibalize the limited, especially financial resources that are available, and to concentrate like a parabolic dish, right? Like parabolic solar energy generation. We have to have pinpoint energy put on key aspects of the phenomenon. And yes, if there is a location that you have detected as having a lot of UAP activity, I can't wait to see your findings, and I can't wait to get other technology companies connected. So yes,
I'll start an email group, an email chain with the Hestin guys, and I'd like to put you in contact with them. I think that would be really
just to interrupt, if you don't mind me saying as well. We had them on the show. I think it was like one of the first shows of 2025 or something, and those guys are like pure scientists. But the moment like you start talking about all of the more speculative stuff, they know everything. Like, they know absolutely everything, but they choose to talk about the science. And that's what I found. I can't speak for Clint, but I found that so cool, is that, like, yes, they find all of, like, the stories and Lou Elizondo's testimony and Grush's testimony really interesting. But when it comes down to it, they're just interested in spending weeks at a time, like, just filming a blank sky in Norway and hoping something shows up, and then stuff does show up, and then they're literally just trying to find out what it is. We called it punk rock science, didn't we?
Punk rock ufology. Yeah, punk rock science. They've got a fishbowl where these things just appear. It's like this valley, and they just weird stuff it's like Skinwalker Ranch, and they're just setting up these sensor suites all around so that they can get multiple perspectives on what's happening. It's very, very, very cool, and they're looking for people to be involved and to expand the network, and it's very, very hip, and I'm just excited that they're doing it, to hear more people are doing it.
You know, I'll just throw in, you know, on my podcast Emergent, I interact with people who are both more on the disclosure side of the effort and those who are more on the UAP science and research side, and there is kind of a little bit of cognitive dissonance, like they're approaching this from different angles. I would say there is a convergence of the two that could be very powerful, which is the press for disclosure of information, key insight, on the record testimony that establishes like key parameters of the phenomena, like the pillars of the phenomena. Are we dealing with a physical alien, or are we dealing with angels and interdimensionals? Right? We need to know that now, and I think that's not too far away. Then there are those who don't really want to engage on the disclosure. They want to engage on the discovery of the key fundamentals through science and research. Now, if the two are to meet in the middle such that we can blow this into the public via transparency efforts, and then these tools and groups exist to provide credible data to society, that's like Goldilocks to me.
Yeah.
And I think both are needed. Yeah.
Another question from our Discord community, Stoned Avengers asks, I would love to read what he thinks about the 2027 event. I'm going to use air quotes on event because we're not sure, but the 2027 event that seems to keep popping up again and again. What are your thoughts?
Well, I've seen a lot, read a lot, heard a lot of speculation about it for sure. You know, is it something planetary, pole reversal? Is it some sort of coronal mass ejection, solar flare event that's been surmised? And I do hear statements to that effect by people from within, you know, the government apparatus at times, which is interesting. Is it related to foreign adversary action? Is China or Russia intending to upend the disclosure process through non-disclosure related events? I do think there's a high probability that as we get closer to true government confirmation of UAP and NHI in this country, that other foreign adversaries will try to upstage that through a variety of things, not least of which could be, you know, the long-awaited conflict in the Straits of the South China Sea over Taiwan, which, you know, Xi Jinping told the Chinese military to be ready for invasion, I believe in 2026, or was it 2027? Someone look that up. So, is a hot war among world superpowers potentially going to be used incidentally or specifically to stop the disclosure of this in the public? Because the disclosure of this, who does it, how they do it, what the fundamentals of the phenomenon are that are disclosed, is going to be enormous in terms of the balance of power in the world. Definitely the tech arms race. We all know about the tech arms race, right? AI and Huawei and TikTok. Well, now we're hearing about the ET tech arms race. Okay, are those two connected? I would say there's a strong likelihood they are. Trade war, tariff war. What is trade about? What is the most powerful, potent currency of trade? Right?
Mhm.
It's technology. It's not iron and corn and coffee. I mean, it's technology. That is the race.
Yeah.
And so if NHI tech reverse engineering programs have been underway for decades, if that's under the skin of these great power conflicts, that's hugely dangerous, high hazard, right?
Mm.
And so is 2027 about that? I have also heard from individuals an interesting series of statements about claimed NHI retaliation. So that there has been, I know Jason Sands said, statements of intent to retaliate against defense contractors unless they return the NHI kit that they either recovered, stole, were given, made agreements for, right? And so is this part of the hot conflict, right? Is this because we have some of their stuff and the bodies that came with it? I would imagine if we do, NHI might not be too happy about that. So, is there going to be some kind of retaliatory act, especially as the USG steps forward incrementally towards being willing to confirm their reality, their presence, when they've been in covert operation and a state of non-disclosure, NHI, for so many years? So, I think this is under the skin of it all. I don't know if I put too much faith in a year, in a month and a date. I've also heard 2036. I've also, Jeremy Corbell, that he has heard from numerous people. He says this was in one video he did maybe 6 months ago, that there is a narrative at play in the halls of the defense establishment, that they are coming, and
Yeah.
they will come in 2036. And I don't know if they come in a threatening fashion or in a benevolent fashion, but that to me smells like a false narrative. I'm very suspicious of that, because they have already been here. How convenient would it be that you observe, you undertake extensive research and analysis of the species, their reproductive abilities, and their psychological functioning, their data, the data
Mhm.
set of our civilization, and then you undertake an incursion, you selectively engage, you find your partners, your beachheads, your willing collaborators, your ignorant accomplices, right, so to speak, in the disinformation world. You also conduct some form of information war against human elements that are unwilling to work with you. You undermine their credibility. You degrade the compact between citizen and government potentially. And in the words of Lou Elizondo, is this a form of IPB, initial preparation for battle, or of the battle
Mm.
space? And then you put out the narrative, we're only coming in 2036. We're not actually here yet, right? And yet you've laid the architecture for how society should respond. And
Yeah.
as I look at this blooming of reported NHI communications, psionic engagements, all these statements, these narratives of humanity being primitive, unworthy of this planet, being a manufactured race, that they manufactured us, which is, of course, a claim we could never confirm ever, that they did it, that we can
Yeah.
never claim, we could never corrupt, we could potentially verify a genetic anomaly in the evolution of our species, but we could never confirm that one actor who is saying they did it is the one who did it, right? So there's zero utility to that argument. There's zero ability of humanity to verify. So what does that mean? And then, of course, these narratives about a prison planet, that we're under containment, but that we could elevate ourselves if we elevate our frequency, our vibration, if we acknowledge the soul contract that we made to be part of a massive genetic experiment and upgrade, and then if we join some kind of galactic federation.
It
Okay,
just we really get into the weeds too with these I call it the expanded universe. It's like we just
right.
people start adding on all these bits and pieces, and I you always bring it back to like brass tacks. What can we see? What do we know? What can we observe? What data do we already have? It's so refreshing. I know I see Dan and Pavel are nodding along, and they're like, yes, like I can tell there's some questions here, and I want to bring our panel into this conversation for the second half of the interview. Pavel, Dan, I don't know who wants to jump in first here, but what's your take on the threat possibility, the threat potential, or the risk potential for what we're looking at?
Well, as you guys know, I've been looking into this for a while now, a few months at least. And what I've found is a lot of conflicting information. The people that I've asked, I specifically asked one of the people who are involved in trying to look into this. And I specifically asked them if this prediction had anything to do with remote viewers. Because if you guys remember, Robert Bigelow did talk about having a remote viewing team and that they didn't see past a certain year. And there's something that I have a problem with when it comes to remote viewing, because although it is repeatable and it is real, I don't think it's reliable enough to entrust a prediction on it. So, and I also think that, and this is a personal belief, that whatever the future is, we are affecting it with our actions in the present. So whenever you want to remote view something, it's not even necessarily happening in the same timeline, I don't think, because I think the future is ever changing. So if there is data on whatever this may be, and whatever year this may come or may happen, it has to be specific data from sensors, not just a prediction from a remote viewing team, regardless of how accurate they are. I do think
That's
that
one
changes.
piece, but it's not the full puzzle. Yeah.
It's not. And it does help, because it's helped intelligence officers get to solve cases with remote viewing, but it's just a minor part that they use amongst a whole plethora of things that they're at their disposal.
Dan, how about you? What's your take on where we're at and what maybe some of the risks are? People should be thinking?
Sure. It seems like the threat narrative historically comes mostly from people who have worked in government, and a big part of working in government is threat assessment. So you kind of have to look at everything as a possible threat, which is fair enough. But a lot of people that have had personal experiences, aside from abductions, but you don't hear a lot of negative parts of that. So I feel like a lot of the threat comes from government, but it doesn't mean it's not real. I mean, we have to assume that there's good and bad things at play here. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
We were, before the show, we were just kicking around a few conversation points. And one of the things that has come up, not just a few times, but enough to raise my eyebrows a little bit, is this idea that they may already walk among us, as some have said. Robert Bigelow is probably one of the most well-known people who have mentioned this, that there are beings that look more or less just like us that are infiltrated or somehow inserted into our world. And I've heard people say, Robert Dean has said this, and Bigelow has said almost the same thing. He's like, you could sit next to one on an airplane, you would never know. Ingo Swann, speaking of remote viewers, I always bring up Ingo. He's talked about it. He said that he's been in the room with hybrids that look just like a human being. You can't tell the difference, but something he could tell was different about this person, but outwardly they look just like us. Reed, I just wonder, what's your instinct tell you? Do you think, are we in a situation where there are beings that look more or less like us that are kind of deeply embedded in our society that may be steering us in a particular direction one way or the other? Or is that just a bridge too far?
Well, if I kind of back out to some of the first principles of the phenomenon, I would say, the events of the 20th century, post World War II, seem to have been part or a large part of the triggering event that prompted either NHI to go from observation to involvement, or that prompted NHI observation and involvement. So the detonation of nuclear weapons, war on a scale never seen before, the destruction of the natural environment of the Earth, overpopulation, massive uptick, hockey stick in technological development seems to have prompted this interest and this engagement and potential intervention into our human affairs in ways that we don't understand. So if I were a hyper intelligent form of life, probably numerically highly inferior to us, right? So they come with craft, but not that many craft, right? They come with some infrastructure to operate here, but they may not be able to operate freely, breathe our atmosphere, be able to defend themselves against the millions of viruses that exist on this planet. So they have to come through and engage selectively and carefully. If I were them, I would want to at first shape the psychological space. So if you can affect the way people perceive reality, that would be advantageous, because then the physical engagement to follow would prefer your intent and program very well, versus you're fighting upstream. Humans want to see this aspect of you that you don't want them to see, and you have to hide it, cloak it, etc. Why not just prevent us from seeing, right? Or cloud the airwaves of our own minds with too much information, TMI, or to distract us, or to fracture our societies and manufacture crises that basically just consume the limited bandwidth we have. So if I were a hypersentient entity that wanted to become involved, alter the nature of the human developmental track, and interface or integrate with it, I would probably prep the psychological space. Then I would prep the information space. So I would introduce information that brings a degree of awareness, acclimatizes people to their presence, but does not pique or alarm their reactive tendencies for self-protection, protection of society, etc. And that also too much awareness would empower human authorities to undertake real action in response as well. So if the public is insufficiently aware, the Overton window is well outside of that, right? So therefore politicians, government officials really can't do anything in the public. Then that also prefers this kind of covert, slow, long game, alteration, potential involvement or integration process. Now, after the psi and info, I would probably begin to engage the bio, right, which is biologically with us. So can you begin to reshape what a human being even is? Now, is that reconditioning human minds? Is that dispreferring certain evolved traits that we presently have? Like we might hope, still the original humans, right? The originally naturally evolved humans. Not to say there might not have been genetic interventions in the past, but let's just assume for a moment that this is a 20th century event, and we have not had that many generations of human beings yet to replicate and to spread genetic anomalies, genetic interventions. And so we are relatively organic in our current state. Well, maybe we're too free thinking. Maybe we're too emotional. Maybe we procreate too aggressively, right? And so if you were an NHI babysitter, as Lou Elizondo posited or proposed the idea of, or if you're an NHI overseer or overlord, I've heard that word as well, or if you simply want to integrate with us for perceived mutual benefit, which may not really be mutually beneficial to us, we don't know, then possibly you would get into the bio side. And then after that, after the biological, after you've adjusted us, would you possibly try to create version 2.0? Something much, much better that marches to your orders, that thinks the way you want. Maybe we're too inflexible, or it would take thousands of years to effectively recreate the human that would work best and most parallel with them. So why not just make a new one and pluck a few humans off the face of the earth, let them germinate in your petri dish up in space, and make numerous genetic alterations, make rapid the generational turnover of that material genetically, and then begin to acclimatize this new entity in our space, get them onboarded, schooled up, give them a human babysitter. A lot of abductees talk about being assigned to a non-human entity to acclimatize them to society. That's very much at the heart of the abduction record, the abduction account. And ultimately, does this individual produce a better leader? Does it produce a better public speaker? Does it produce someone with psi abilities that can affect hundreds of minds all around them, thousands of minds, right? I mean, there is a lot of indications that NHI are highly telepathic, and that they bridge the physical psi barrier, not seamlessly, but rapidly or extensively.
More easily for sure than
more easily or more. Yeah, their abilities are tremendous on both sides of the coin. I would say our abilities are there as well. They're just uncultivated, and we're largely ignorant of our extrasensory abilities. We're becoming aware partly through this phenomenon, right? As we must, because I think a big the playing field where this contest is taking place, this contest of will, intent, and purpose, is in the psi space. It's not just physical. And so are we going to lose that contest simply because we were rotely ignorant that it even existed or was taking place? And so it is that cusp where, if we're dealing with a telepathic entity that has found ways to bridge out of physical manifestation into a purely mental or psychological environment, if they have developed technologies that facilitate that bridging, that amplify their capability in that psi space, then we are dealing with entities that could affect what we think, how we feel, that ultimately affects what we do. That would be a hyper-intelligent way of making someone do something you want.
And it would also explain a great deal of the secrecy. Like if they're infiltrated, and you have different organizations within the government or different groups that are maybe working separately from one another, and no one knows who's infiltrated. That could be really a very bizarre situation for the intelligence community to find itself in.
And also, if there is a neurological control mechanism, that is also extremely difficult to disclose to the public. Now, everyone second guesses their dreams, their emotions, their impulses. They suspect one another or their neighbor of not being human. It is literally catastrophic, right? Catastrophic disclosure. So that catastrophic disclosure has been phrased in that way is not just that we humans can't handle the truth. We all balk at that, right? We have access. The skies are not classified. We should have access to the truth. Well, would we be stable and would we survive our access to that truth? The truth that we are being influenced potentially neurologically, potentially genetically. Now that's a much bigger ask of society at large. I also just want to say here, because this might sound very out there, and people kind of do point the finger at me as being way ahead of the evidence curve, too speculative. How do we really know this is real? Okay. Well, again, I think this is responsible speculation. If UAP are structured craft under intelligent control, intelligence means intent. Okay. Their intent is almost guaranteed to not match our own. And so we have to negotiate their intent with ours. Their intent may be beneficial in their cognitive experience, whatever that is, but may actually result in massive deleterious effects on Earth, right? There have been many cases of human leadership trying to do good and causing catastrophe, right? And the loss of life. So we have to that's just the base level of the nature of what's happening. We are negotiating intents. In a state of non-disclosure and covert operation, we have to use behavior to decode intent. We don't have a viable way to demand their disclosure either. So comms channels don't exist with society. We should, at this point, I think there are many indications that we're within the larger category of NHI, which some might think is, well, that means non-physical entities, interdimensional entities. Could it mean God and angels themselves, right? There's a risk of category inflation to the point where NHI means nothing. Within NHI, at that broadest point, is alien NHI. And, just a few weeks ago, Eric Davis in front of Congress, they are alien. They are not human, right? Are they extraterrestrial? Meaning, are they not from this Earth? ? But they are physical alien. We should just, I think, land that as a very solid premise. Now, in the physical interaction between life forms that have evolved in a universe of limited resources, there are evolutionary traits that arise. Like in the insect world, mimicry is extensively employed. Also in the animal kingdom, insects and animals mimic those of another species to gain entry to their hive, to gain access to their food supply, etc. So there is a proclivity of life to deceive in order to get what one wants, right? And so if we are in this engagement of intelligence and intent, I think we should take it as very possible or probable that there is a deceptive capability that has been developed by these entities that could be deployed here. And we are highly vulnerable to that. This is an environment rich for disinformation, not just human. So, but yeah, getting back to the potential for non-humans walking among us, I think there are indications, especially in the testimonial record, of interaction with human-looking but not human entities. And if we're at that point, if it's gone that far, this is the wake-up call. This is where this goes from an interest and an exploration to a calling to get involved and to take action, in my opinion. And I'm shocked that more folks are not getting over this, bridging this gap to get to the point of like, this is confronting our species. It is a contest of intents, and there is real risk and hazard and potential threat. And we have to societally get to a point where we can deal with that. And that many people, at least in the UAP crowd, don't want to go there is a head scratcher for me. Interestingly, in my experience, many people in the public, because I introduce this to people all the time, all the way to hostile intent, by the way, they can totally deal with it. It makes total sense that there are entities that would want something about this planet and its unique biological mineral composition, or us as a species, or other life on this earth, and that we are destroying it and threatening the habitability of the planet itself, causing a sixth mass extinction, and that UAP suddenly appear. There could be a connection right there that could be made. Not to say that concludes the whole phenomenon. I think there are other things at play. Absolutely. I don't think we're entering a hostile universe. I just think we may have provoked, through our nuclear detonations and other activity, we have flashed the universe a dangerous signal ourselves.
I am inclined to agree with you. I feel like if you look at the global scale problems that we're dealing with right now, that's got to have something to do with it for sure. Right. It's not happening in a vacuum. Xander, you are a little bit more love and light than I am. I'm known for Doomer Fridays, but
me too.
Can you shine a little light on this for me, and before we all get depressed here? What's your thought?
Can anybody hear the fan going in the background? By the way,
that's your biggest fan.
Do you want me to?
That's how we know
you have your first fan, Xander.
I'll turn it off if it's a problem.
Nah, it's not. It's not. You're fine.
Okay, yeah, it's no secret. I'm coming at everything from the love and light perspective. However, Reed, I think your approach is perfect. Like, logically speaking, like if NHI were to land on my own very tiny lawn tomorrow, I would ask them, like, what the hell are you doing here? I wouldn't just sit down and say, hey bro, do you want to meditate? Like, it's not that kind of like steadfast belief in this kind of thing.
And that's first instinct. I mean, we should respond instinctually and be human.
Yes.
And not gaslight ourselves into thinking our human reactions are all fear-based or primitive, and we should just open up to higher intentions. So I think there is a first human instinctual response. And by the way, like,
it's important.
We, the UAP crowd, we can get all niche-y and think and get all nuanced and high level and consciousness based on this. The truth is, there are 7 billion humans who are about to find out about this. And when they hear about it, they're going to be instinctual. So like to work with that swell of human awareness, we don't want to gaslight that basic human response.
So based on that idea that, let's say, 7 billion humans are about to find out the truth, in my opinion, it really could go one of two ways. It's to me, it's patently obvious that NHI have chosen not to reveal themselves. That's quite obvious at this point. If they're visiting the planet, they've not landed anywhere and on camera and said, here we are. So there's a reason for that, and it's either because they're keeping themselves secret because they have malintent, or they're keeping themselves secret because I think of it more of the conservation side of things. When we're, trying to orangutans, for example, we will go and observe them from a distance. We make a very keen point of not interacting, even if they get themselves into trouble. We try very hard. If it was the last orangutan on Earth, we'd probably stop it from dying. But other than that, we try and let them make their own path, because
so they're
we
taking
know
the
that,
scientist approach.
Yeah, so we're more
like the Sentinel Island.
Yeah,
thing.
so we know that these guys are capable of more, but they need to realize they're capable of more before we just show up and say, hey, welcome to the family. So that's more my approach with things. When it comes to intent, I would say, because I think you made one statement that, again, I fully respect your logical deductions
I
here.
love going back and forth on this with those who see it differently than me. So this is great.
I think in terms of intent, that there's one. I think you said that there's a very small possibility that the NHI would have the same intentions that humanity would have, and I think a core part of at least probably a non-negligible portion of the people that are into ufology believe in the idea of universal consciousness. So that connects all of us together. And if the intention of humanity is to increase well-being, I think that's a sort of a Sam Harris sort of quote, is that we always want to increase our own well-being. Maybe in reality, we're trying to increase the well-being of our own experience. Maybe NHI know that they're trying to increase the experience, the well-being of their own experience, which they know is the same experience that we're having as conscious beings in the universe. So that's, in my opinion, the way that our intents could actually sync up. And again, it is quite a niche point within ufology, this whole love and light kind of thing. But the only evidence that I have that points to it being really quite reliable at this point is the fact that we are still here. Even if there's a species that's 1,000 years ahead, given that we are literally about to invent the singularity of AI and all of the potential that uncovers, anything 1,000 years ahead will surely have the ability to completely just dismantle us overnight. No problems, no diplomacy needed. We'd just be gone overnight, and they could have whatever they want from this planet, no problems.
But maybe we are part of what they want. Maybe it is integration and collaboration. Now, maybe they want to adjust us, tweak us, or fully reprogram the nature of the human OS to do so. But this whole thing of we're here, they haven't eliminated us, and that there's no and therefore after that. It just means that parameterizes a new set of possibilities. And we are changing too, right? So it's like as you said, we're here. It's like, yeah, we're different. We're not where we were in the 1940s, and I do not ascribe all that to any sort of NHI presence. But just by being alive doesn't necessarily mean that they want to keep us in our pristine state, or that they want to work with all of our best desires and values. I think I want to be on the hopeful side as well. I definitely think the universe has it all, right? I'm not sure we're going to encounter all of that in our first interactions, especially when, to some degree, we may have provoked, right, this interaction. The detonation of 2,000 nuclear warheads, did we flash the universe? Now,
over
did
here,
that bring in the benevolent? Did that bring in the benevolent? Did that bring in the concerned? Did that bring in the self-interested? And the other thing is about intent, because intent is often taken, this project of decoding intent. We're not going to get inside their head. We're not going to get their consciousness. Their consciousness is probably layers beyond our own, right? And so just different. But what we can discern is whether their activity is beneficial for human intent. We can't neglect the thousands, if not tens of thousands, of direct experiencer accounts. We also have not even begun to do research on this. The study everyone mentions is the FREE study, FRIEEE, okay, that says like 75% of experiencers have had positive abduction experiences. Okay. That FREE study did not have any research credentials or methodologies in place to make sure that those with negative experiences were engaged and felt safe to communicate.
Wasn't it just an open survey, I think, right?
100%. Was
Yeah.
there any vetting that someone didn't submit twice? Or, was there any weeding out of things that looked unpreferable to the research findings? I mean, this is not a credible finding. So,
But also, I just want to say, abductions
Yeah,
are kind of a hard thing to fact check too. It's kind of a very tough thing to really do follow-ups on. You know what I mean?
I mean, to some degree, to the degree we make it fringe and discrediting of a person and under hypnosis, it's not all under hypnosis. People have real medical
For sure.
events on their body, bruises, cuts, etc. Did they go to the doctor? Were those medical records captured? Were they centralized? No, and no, right? Because if you go to the doctor and say, I woke up with this, and I think I was abducted, guess where you go next? You go to the psych ward, or at least you go out for EMDR or something like that, So we are societally suppressing the testimony of those who have experienced. Now that's positive and negative and neutral, but just like with sexual assault in this country at least, that was a taboo topic for decades. You could not talk about that, right? It took courageous and brave people to go out, substantiate that this was taking place, make it societally acceptable to engage on it, and then the downpour of accounts came out, and now we know that roughly a third of women in Asia, for example, that continent, report sexual assault in their life. That's how preponderant that phenomenon is among humans.
And
how
still
preponderant
underreported.
is- 100%, right? So we don't know what experiencers are experiencing. I talk to a lot of people on this. Many of them are terrified to even put on Reddit or Twitter that they had an experience. It's highly discouraged.
It's so hard to to imagine someone. I think most recently about Chris Bledsoe's regression transcript, which his son read on an episode of his podcast not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago. And to hear Chris Bledsoe talk in an interview, and our friend Chris Ramsey has spoken with him, and Pavel, didn't you talk to Chris Bledsoe as well?
I talked to him on many DM chats, but I haven't had him on the show yet.
Not on the show yet. To hear him talk now, he's very positive. He's very warm to this idea that it's going to be a catharsis for us. It's a good thing. It's something that humanity needs to experience in its time. And these beings are nothing but positive and helpful. And then when you listen to the words actually from the transcript of his regression, he's in a complete state of shock and panic, and he's just freaking out. And it's that is a common theme from one abduction to another. I'm not saying they're all like that, but people in the moment, when they're reliving the moment of what's actually happening to them as they're realizing it, it's very consistent that they panic and they're just in a complete state of mental.
Barney Hill. Barney Hill's a regression, or when
Oh
he's
my God.
that video, or the audio.
So do you think, you mentioned earlier, you kind of touched on this, and I'm just curious if you could maybe tease this out a little bit. Maybe there is some psychological manipulation taking place with abductees where they're imprinted with a positive version of what happened. So then they go back, and when they start talking to the rest of us, they're like, oh, it's great. You're going to love it. You're going to love it when they show up. It's going to be phenomenal. Hunger, it's all going to be over. Just let them in, and it's all going to be good. What do you think is going on there? Why this disparity between regressions and then what people go on later to say when they say it's a positive?
Yeah, I mean, I think if a highly traumatic physical experience takes place, forced removal from one's home, forced experimentation or medical procedures, etc., if you go read the typical abductee account, it is highly traumatic. So does something get triggered in the human mind where the mind, in order to function tomorrow at work, undertakes its own rewriting of the narrative? Also, if I was the NHI operator in that procedural setting, of course, you're going to imply or imprint some screen memorization, some overlay, possibly out of compassion to some degree, the person can function, but also out of function for the program to continue. I mean, you can't have thousands and tens of thousands of people walking around like zombies at work saying that they were taken out of their home last night, dragged out by another entity, right? And so, like, that doesn't work for the program itself. The program would require some overlaying on top of the original experience. Back to the human side, Stockholm syndrome is a reality with forced abduction, human on human.
Yeah.
And so humans have a way of reframing the experience in a way that is positive, that they did desire to have happen, possibly for functionality. I was talking to an abduction researcher. I'm sorry, not a researcher, a support group coordinator recently, someone who has for over a decade been running a private support group for experiencers, and very fascinating information they shared with me. I mean, this is clinical level, right? This is a person who's actually, you could say, clinically engaged. They're not a clinician, but they're actually engaged in helping people through the experience. Right off the bat, they made very clear that roughly 80% of the people who enter the support environment have had a negative experience. And they also have talked about how there is this interesting stepwise progression from rationalization, seeking validation, and then all the way over to acceptance of what happened. But then the last step, this is the key thing, is negative events turn positive, and there is the feeling of a grand sense of self that comes into play.
Yeah.
And is that aggrandizement, like I'm a chosen one? Was that communicated to them? And now is that done so that they can become, in a sense, an apologist or a messenger for this program?
Can I
right?
can I dovetail off of that really quickly? Because I think this is something that you talked about it a little bit earlier. You said we're kind of like, I'm going to use a different analogy here, but it's like we both have young children. It's like we're in kindergarten and we look out the window and we see all these adults out there, but they're kind of off in the distance, and there's this grown-up world, and it's all happening, and there's cars. I think about my son in school, and he looks out and he's seeing like this whole grown-up world, and he's like, why is all this happening? We, in a sense, are sort of like these kindergartners, and there's this very sophisticated continental, as you mentioned, kind of consciousness, or continental, out the next layer of reality, the intergalactic civilization, or whatever you want to call it. But that's real. It's out there. And these beings have got all this experience in dealing with and existing in that world and surviving that world. It stands to reason to me that if abductees here on Earth are being taken aboard craft or taken to wherever, and these procedures are performed on them, that these beings would have, for one, talents and abilities that we don't have mastery of, like you said, in the mental realm or the psychic realm. They can influence our minds. And it seems like it would be just common sense that they would use that like a tranquilizer dart on a rhinoceros. They would calm your mind with a telepathic message of, we're your family. It's all good. You don't want to hurt us. We've known you since before you were born, and we're going to know you forever. And it's all. And I wonder to what extent that is just when you hear Jake Barber's another one who recently said he had this mental contact with the 8-gon craft that he was transporting, and he said. He cried on camera as he was talking to Ross Coulthard. He didn't cry, but he almost cried. He choked it back. And he was like, it's the most beautiful thing in the world. And the whole time I'm watching it, I'm just thinking, it would be like if they took you prisoner and just injected you with a bunch of morphine, and you're sitting there having the greatest trip of your life, and you're just laid back. Oh, it was awesome. But you're still abducted. And these people who have been children, they've been taken hundreds of times in their life. For 30 years, they've been abducted over and over and over and over again. Is that kind of what you were talking about? This next level of warfare, this next level of conflict beyond where we're comfortable talking about. They have these tools that we just don't understand.
This is the game we're in, and we don't understand the game we're in. And that's a big problem. We just can't take it at face value. I think for the UFO crowd, if there's like a PSA or a news blast over the top of the screen, we cannot take at face value the assumptions and the perceived experiences and those that have been reported, meaning not everything is reported, right? And conclude the nature of the phenomenon based upon that. We have to get in and understand the nature of the engagement, Because even if someone says, I felt good, did they inject them with any one of a number of neurotoxins or transmitters that can alter the human experience, right? We just have to be more intelligent. We're not being very intelligent in how we assess the phenomenon. It's very fear or hope, belief and assumption based. And we just kind of, we're exploring within a field of play where there is hard brass tacks kinetic action being taken. And so I think we just need to wise up to that. Also, if someone is forcibly removed from their home, that is a prosecutable crime, right? Aggravated assault is a thing. And so like, just because you felt good doesn't mean a crime was not committed. Okay. So people often people push back on when I talk about this, they say, we're anthropomorphizing this. These are the human terms that we think within. This is bigger, broader, it's expanded. It's another level of consciousness. Well, here's what I would say is, the phenomenon is a human engagement project. It is in human terms, which means they have understood and taken the time to understand us. They are speaking in ways that work for us. They are altering our experience. They are interfacing with the human experience. So if human beings are reporting anomalous thoughts and mental ideation, like we can't just toss that out and say, that's just a fear-based human. We need to embrace the love. I mean, like the program is about us and our earth and this engagement. And so though their consciousness level, I'm sure, is far beyond our own, they have found ways to engage in all too human ways. And that's why we have to look at the possibility for narrative deception, disinformation, psychological intimidation and manipulation tactics, the potential of biological medical effects that have been reported. Like this is where it's happened.
The weaponization of religious iconography, right? Like Chris Bledsoe talks about the lady, this sort of like, and then there's a painting that his friend did of this woman who is like this sort of mythical goddess being that is sort of loosely could fit into a number of different religious contexts, and she's delivering this message. And to hear him describe it and to read it in his book, it reads like this guy was shown a hologram. They played a movie for him, and he watched it, and then he comes back and he's like, "They're great." I would love to talk to him about this, but I think you make such a great point. This is they're playing 5D chess, and we just can't see the other dimensions. We're stuck on this level, and we're working with such scrappy information. And you're advocating a street smart approach, which just seems like such common sense. Like just
I think
it's like we're like trapped in this paradigm of pawn 1 up or 2 up,
right?
and we're not questioning the board and why there are that many squares and how many chips they have versus how many like the board itself has been in some ways set. And so we need to back out of this highly, monocular view upon the phenomenon as either nuts and bolts or our expanded engagement with a higher conscious universe, the end, nothing in between. And we're not dead yet. So we're all good, right? It's like, there is so much more in between.
And the game is changing while we play it.
There are gulags in North Korea where they're not dead yet, but they're not necessarily living their best life either. You know what I mean? Like if you're born in a gulag and you grow up there and you think that's the world, and there are people who have escaped and talk about that, they think that's the whole world. And maybe that's kind of the situation we're in. That's all we know.
I fully agree that the humanity seems to be the project. No matter what is going on, we do seem to be the focal point of a project, whether it's we're being like this. Some people call us livestock, some people call us zoo animals, some people talk about Prison Planet, as you've said. So yeah, I think the approach you've got is spot on. Like we absolutely need to be, we can't just say, well, you're bigger than me, so whatever you need to do. Right. Like that's not the human spirit. And I think they quite clearly would know that by now, given how many years they've reportedly been interacting with us as a species. I did have one question regarding like the whole increase in activity since nuclear proliferation. Nuclear power is obviously, to us, incredibly dangerous, seemingly very powerful, but in the grand scheme of interstellar travel, it's actually quite a small amount of power. But do you think that maybe nuclear power is when that signature is detected, it's acts more of as a beacon. So like they see us doing this, and then they say, okay, those guys, they're quite clearly less than 100 years away from AI. And maybe that's the reason they've shown they still control and fine, yeah.
Technical difficulties. I mentioned something 2 weeks ago, and the moment I said it, someone cut the internet line to my house.
Well, it's definitely not anybody here's
we're back.
internet. Oh, we're back. Say oyster in the chat if you can hear us.
Yes, we're
Keyword
back.
oyster. Yeah,
Keyword oyster.
that's Xander's safe word.
We're back. All right.
Say oyster and drop the ball.
Why did I think of the word oyster? I don't know. I've only had oysters like once in my life.
It's an aphrodisiac.
What a European safe word.
You're such a prompt.
Should I take off
Oyster,
my
okay, they're
shirt
back.
now? Or?
Right.
Okay, we're back. All right. Sorry, guys. We had just had a little technical glitch, and maybe we're getting a little too close to the truth, and the deep state came in and paused the stream.
Can I ask something?
You're talking about UAP nukes and Immaculate Constellation. You're
Yes. Yeah, that's it.
Can I ask something? Because this whole conversation has been really, it made me question the obvious kind of phenomenon that is happening, which is that experiencers seem to have seem to be evolving in a certain way because of these orb sightings and near-death experiences and contact with entities in their rooms and all that. Do you guys think that it's possible to prevent for this control mechanism from the phenomenon to happen? Because I keep going back to an old video of John Keel, where he talks about what he thinks the phenomenon is, and he clearly states that it's kind of playing with our perception. It's been playing with our perception forever. Do you think there's any way in which we don't feel so powerless to that? Because yeah, it's clearly like an experiment on humans, though, because it does affect directly our psyche and our consciousness. But is there a way to find out if we can overcome this control?
Yes, absolutely. My family has been at the epicenter of the experience of this kind of psi level engagement and potential contest for decades. My father and I are and have developed a practice. We call it mental shielding. You can call it whatever you want, psionic defense, mental shielding, that we have developed and found to be very effective when you are being engaged in this way in ways you don't want. So we have to develop the ability to function on this new playing field, the psi playing field. And so I do teach that mental shielding practice. I also think this is really where spirituality and religion can be powerful. Many people have remarked at how when you invoke the name of a higher power or a spiritual founder, teacher, prophet, that something changes in your encounters with the phenomenon. Abductions stop, right? They back off during the abduction, or it disrupts the nature of the programmatic involvement with you in the moment. How interesting. How interesting.
Why would
And
that
so
stop
is
them, do
there,
you think?
I mean, I would, it's possible our religious proclivities, our orientation to a higher power might not mesh well with how they see the nature of the universe, being highly technological beings with profound top-down ability to control reality and space-time. Do they have kind of a religion as God? Do they have an entity, me, the super entity as God? Are they playing God, right? Without even thinking in those terms. So they see us supplicate and subordinate and open ourselves to this unseen power. How strange is that? That might actually be more anomalous than we think. Although I don't think humans have any exclusive sense of spirituality in the universe. That would not be plausible to me. But we're very close to our tribal origins. Technology and the Industrial Revolution have reshaped us and our relationship to spirit, God, religion only recently. And so we might be more spiritually rich than we think. And so when you invoke that power, or when you almost you put yourself under the wing of that higher entity, of that higher power, can this more powerful NHI entity, is it obstructed in affecting you neurologically? I think that's, in my experience, I've had that experience. So I do think there's a spiritual aspect to our consciousness that we could actually become more proximal to, and that exerts force. So spirituality is not just a nice kind of like sense of retreat and a vague, amorphous, unprovable space that may or may not exist. In my view, there's a spiritual aspect to self. Now, if you align yourself with that self and become more proximal to it in your waking state, I think that side of yourself can exert force and also a protective barrier that possibly no other thinking entity can penetrate, because it's a divine or God-given essence to who you are. So I think a spiritual practice could be very powerful. I think there's a lot, just becoming aware of the mental, psychic environment around you, like what thought forms are active, what anomalous impulses are potentially acting upon you. To do that, though, you have to map your native emotional impulses and states. You can't just start to write all of this onto another entity. And I know folks tend to do that. Oh, it's all them. It's them again. It's them again. I wouldn't think in those terms.
That is so brilliant. Can I take a second on that? You just said something that resonated with me really well, and we've been trained to think, your thoughts come from inside your brain, right? Like these are just bubbling up from inside. But we're taught that there's no way a thought from outside can enter your head. The common wisdom, the common understanding is that it's all inside your head. So if there's weirdness going on in there, you've just got to do some internal work and deal with that.
Right.
But you mentioned that we don't have any training or understanding really of what the actual mental environment looks like because we're taught that it's not a real thing. In other words, like there's this shared mental space. Can you talk a little bit more about that? This idea that how do you identify a thought coming in from outside that might be trying to like throw you off or lead you down a different path or get you to think in a way that...
Yes. Understanding oneself, knowing oneself fully, and I mean mentally, emotionally, understanding your life journey, what you've been through and why it happened, what was you, what was others is critical. I mean, this is spiritual development. It's inner development, really.
Yeah.
And that sets the stage for being able to discern the environment. But if you don't know yourself, if you have not accounted for your permeability in the psychological space with other humans, family influences, relationship, toxic relationships, understand your own dynamics, your attachment styles, your shadow self. Like I do encourage all of that psychological, can you call it IPB, preparation of the battle space, right? I mean, you're preparing your own space to engage with other life forms, and it'll be high utility with engaging with other humans, right? But now we're engaging in a space where there are non-humans. I would also propose that there might be non-physical non-humans also involved in this space. And, you can see if that resonates or not. But it could be a much more complex ecosystem in the psi space than we acknowledge. And we have a permeability. I think we do think things that are influenced from beyond. And, we see that in societal trends already. Like, why do things trend, right? Why do there seem to be certain waves that move through society that bring certain people into power or that provoke physical war? I mean, you look at the run up to the rise of the Nazi Party, the early events of World War II, the aggression in Europe, and you look at German society, and this is kind of a pre-technological era. I mean, there was light bulbs and radio, but not television, right? Mm. And you look at the movement within society that formed around seemingly one man and his charismatic core, but it wasn't. It was a psychological psi level swell of mind impacting mind, a ripple effect that generated force, and then that force has its own kinetic and direction, so it can move on its own. It might even almost have a mind of its own. This is kind of outside our observing capabilities to fully understand yet, but I think
are you suggesting, Reed?
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. Just to follow up on that, are you suggesting that large groups of people, we say it's group psychology, they behave in a certain way based on group psychology? Do you think it's more than that? Are you suggesting that there's an actual field communicating between people in a group, or whether they're physically near each other or not, but spread out in a mental space, right, that they could actually resonate as a frequency together, negatively or positively? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's growing evidence that subatomic particles can become entangled across space-time at great distance, right? So, is there some aspect to our consciousness, our non-localized, non-physically based consciousness, that intertwines or entangles? And as we entangle with other minds, does that generate a force that, in a sense, is a new entity? It's like a projectile in the space. And is that attracted to new minds with which it can couple, interact, and integrate? And of course, then are there non-physical entities that interact with those thought forms, that feed off of them, fuel them? I know this is well outside the bounds of science and what we can observe technologically, but this non-localized consciousness, what are the fundamental components of the space, right? We think it's just mind, but could it be thought form coupling with minds? And now if there are entities, NHI, physical alien NHI, that have found a way to enter that space, manufacture thought forms, fuel them even with technology, right, to amplify their power, and then also through technology or mind make more vulnerable the recipient, open up minds. Could they, in essence, reshape the thought space? And now they're impacting the action space.
So that is such a powerful weapon.
This was about to happen in '94. from a Mexican doctor that I cover a lot on my channel, and he disappeared right before he was about to complete a really, really important experiment that had to do with quantum entanglement, but between human minds, not between particles. And this happened in '94. So I'm glad you're talking about this.
Yeah. I mean, we would be remiss to not account for it, at least, because to just assume it's body on body. I think we're well beyond that. But I don't think we should then take it to mean the entities are non-physical necessarily. Like we have ESP capabilities, wouldn't they? They seem to demonstrate them, but yet many people assume the phenomenon is interdimensional or extratemporal or non-physical simply because it has a psi set of capabilities.
Man, Reed, we just blew through 2 hours.
I know, right?
So great. Do you
We're
have
done?
a
Tell me
couple
we're
more
done.
minutes? I mean, how are you on time?
I'm
Okay.
good. I'm hosting an AMA tonight, by the way, for anyone who wants to grill me further. So forerunner.reedsummers.com. Ask me questions. Ask me anything. But yeah, I've got that's tonight, but I got time. Yeah.
Okay, we'll shout that out again at the end of the show. I just want to take another 15 minutes and get to some of the viewer questions that we didn't get a chance to get to, because we have a actually that have stacked up here. Let me pull up my Discord screen here and I can go through those. Okay, so let's see. We did CJ the Alien Guy. We talked about 2027. Jeff Bradford says, Reed, have you seen the Catherine Austin Fitts, former assistant HUD secretary under Bush Sr. interview, where she claims that she believes that evil interdimensional beings, as you just mentioned, are working with elites to depopulate the planet and take control?
I didn't hear that reference. I have heard other references to NHI infrastructure or the funding of said infrastructure. So I think that's a meaningful line of inquiry. I know there is a strong proclivity to see this as demonic, as somehow fundamentally evil, and as attached to some kind of Luciferian, larger Judeo-Christian narrative at play. I mean, it makes sense that we're going to try to see it that way if we think that way already. The projecting of human belief in religion onto the phenomenon is a tendency across the board, across all societies, and will be. Also, NHI using those as points of vulnerability or points of entry is also probably going to happen because it is too lucrative. It's how do you gain access to people's sense of allegiance beyond logic, right? Beyond institution, the institutions of human civilization, religion. Okay, how do you get that allegiance? Well, pretending to be a god, not so sure about that. That's going to raise some heckles. How about arguing that you created the faith tradition, right? Or that it is the cargo cult of a hostile NHI and therefore has no validity, and therefore it blows up your ontology, your sense of existence and life. And now you're open to basically any operating system that wants to install itself in you about human origins, human destiny, God, etc. It could go both ways, right? It could either interject and try to co-opt, or it could do a massive takedown of one's belief structure and basically install something new. So, this whole view of them as evil, I don't think that's necessary or constructive. We don't need to character assess the NHI. We need to assess the impacts of their activity on us. And that's where intent for me is beneficial, detrimental, not malevolent, benevolent. But I know the Collins elite, all of this, God, angels, demons stuff. I think it's the projection onto the phenomenon of our beliefs based on partly its hostile activity. I mean, it is reported to be doing things to people that are highly damaging to them, highly destructive to their lives. Is that evil? You could conclude that is evil. Do we need to wrap that into a Luciferian narrative? I don't think so.
George Psionic Man in the Discord says, "Hi Reed, Nick Pope, MOD spoke of disclosure with a little d and disclosure with a capital D. I asked him what quote optimal disclosure looked like for him. Same question to you, and where would you steer the ship of disclosure?"
Yeah, great question. Well, disclosure began in this kind of U.S.-centric, defense-centric, aerospace framing. I think it needs to go international. It needs to get out of the U.S. and it also needs to get out of the military context, because I would assert that the bulk of NHI interaction has happened at the civilian level, and therefore the true record of activity is held by common people. Those people need to be encouraged to speak. There needs to be fora for them to come forward. I think society needs to be able to generate its own evidence of UAP, and I think that is coming. That's very possible. It's a project I'm involved in, and I look forward to seeing that take shape in the next year. So civilian, citizen, activism, science, and disclosure, those three things, science, activism, and disclosure, maybe the opposite order, I think are really important. I would like to see a little bit more come out from those who have been on the program. And there are apparently those people, they're waiting in the wings to come out with groundbreaking testimony. So, the UAP declassification office in Congress is churning away. Maybe they can work with the new administration and at least, crack the apparatus and get a little bit of a gas leak going that then becomes an unstoppable opening, that information begins to just flow. So Goldilocks for me would be more whistleblower testimony, an international dialogue on disclosure, to begin to get non-governmental organizations, even religious organizations like the Vatican, involved and speaking on this, because I think there are indications they have evidence themselves. It is possible those organizations could actually do disclosure. Not sure they would without broad cover from society and potentially governments, but I know there are efforts to bring this to the floor of the United Nations through the Principality of San Marino in Italy. So there are efforts at way to get this international. I think the United Nations is the perfect venue. The Office of Outer Space Affairs, I believe, already exists. NASA has an office for interplanetary, what is it? Someone find it. Interplanetary something. And of course, that's dealing with asteroids and, space phenomena. Well, here you go. Here's other phenomena it could deal with. So we have these offices and different settings in which this can be entertained. I think it needs to go there. I think UAP detection and tracking needs to become a societal capability, and we're already at the cusp of that. And I think we need to be having the UFO conversation all the time, everywhere, basically, which
Reed,
you guys are doing.
Do you mind if I just interrupt it?
Yeah, please.
Do you think so in your version of optimal disclosure, is there, on a Wednesday, nothing happens, but on a Thursday, disclosure happens? Or is it more gradual than that? Do you think there is a day where disclosure happens? Or do you think it's more misunderstood and it takes months and months and months?
Right. Is there a D-Day for disclosure? I doubt it. I think even if there was a landed craft on camera in this country and the administration came out and made statements about it, guess what the citizens of China and Russia would think, right? Guess what the left would think, right? So it's going to be partisan, messy. It's also a highly powerful and profitable event politically, possibly economically. And so don't underestimate conflict over contact with NHI and the history of contact. No better bus under which to throw your competitor, and no better stage upon which to put yourself and your company. So I'm expecting it to be a messy, conflicted process, which is why citizen activists are going to be key. We have to relay into the public an accurate representation of the historic activity of reported NHI. Because, like Jeremy Corbell brought out, 2036, there could very well be a false narrative about we're just coming now, or they're the bad ones, we're the good ones, but they're not here anymore, we got rid of them. So you can thank us, by the way. Or there's a nuclear confrontation, North Korea, South Korea, China, US, and guess who shows up to deactivate the nuke? UAP. And guess what follows? A statement of we are your brothers, we are here to help you, and come to the table. So the narrative, the opportunity for that is just profound. So I think it's why we're needed. I don't think it'll be an all of a sudden event. I think it would be a slow dawning. Also, back to the former question. Actually, it's this question: optimal disclosure. I think we need to land in the public consciousness the base fundamentals. We are dealing with physical, non-human alien entities. There are strong indications they are not of Earth origin. They are extraterrestrial. If we obfuscate that, if we throw it all up in the air like confetti and hope that the public plucks out of the air the truth, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. The public are already ready to talk about physical extraterrestrial entities. We've been staring at data about exoplanets and the proclivity of life to arise under extreme scenarios, etc. The public are ready to think about alien life, and that it's here already is something a lot of people can handle. Now, the harder aspects are harder, and I don't think all of that needs to come out day one, but I think it does need to come out. I think that we need to basically process this event as a species, and it could be a powerful unifier if we make it that. I think unintelligently done or for partisan purposes, it'll be a divider. I don't underestimate the possibility of an actual regional war taking place because of disclosure. I think that's a possibility. That's how big, that's big D disclosure.
Big D disclosure.
I would say that a little bit of the previous wars may have had something to do with this fight over technology too. It's also very possible. And if you go back to all the way to fascist Italy, the Magenta crash, it indicates that that may have been one of those MacGuffins that everybody was after during that time. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the Wunderweapons, right? The weapon that could win the war, the Nazi fixation with the occult. I mean, it's some interesting data points there. I would also say, the wars in Iraq, whatever happened in year 2000, that turning
Artifacts.
point. I mean, the Bush era disclosure efforts, Cheney as gatekeeper. I mean, it's starting to squeak out of the airtight defense apparatus that this was a player on the field of those geopolitical decades. Is it a factor in the tensions over Ukraine, Taiwan, big tech, right? Big data, surveillance, bioengineering, human biological engineering, transgenics. I mean, we've got to be asking those questions. I don't think we can correlate immediately. We have to be very high discipline, I would argue, in how we interface with those possibilities. But if we're asking the right questions, I think the information may find its way out. If no one's asking the question and it's outside the Overton window of everyone, including the UFO crowd, what incentive is there for it to come out? I mean, this is lowering the pain threshold for the secret keepers. I think some of the secret keepers really want to come out, right? Yeah. But as long as we're ignorant and obfuscating it ourselves and calling it angels and demons, so
I think
we have got to meet them halfway.
That was one of the most unsettling things about the Matthew Brown interview with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp is there's you can clearly see how uncomfortable he is sitting there trying to answer their questions in the most honest way he can, but there's always this background sort of sound of like how terrible this actually is if the truth really comes out. Like it's like the way it's stated, it's like people need to know there's still time. There's still time for what? Like we can change things if we act now. Like there's little phrases that come out in these discussions, and you just have to wonder, what do you know that you're not telling us? And when will someone tell us?
Yeah. Ross Coulthart yesterday, being told 2027, and those telling him they need the public to know, like eyes, the size of silver dollars. It's like, what do they need the public to know? Right?
Yeah, say it.
If there's a hostile NHI that is a threat, it could be a profound unifier. It could stop the next war, not start the next war.
Do you think that's what is behind the reason they don't want us to know that is because it could be a great unifier? In other words, what do national borders evaporate? We become one species, one people from one planet with one origin story. We're suddenly unified as human beings. And now we're not playing the Russians are bad, Chinese are bad, Americans are good game. That's all gone.
Right. We're not playing risk the power anymore. Yeah. The nation-state competition game. Yes, I think there are probably interests that are afraid of the collapse of the power structure. that are afraid for themselves, their careers, their financial incentives. I'm sure it's all baked in there. Why do they? I mean, well, I think there are factions that do want the public to know, for the very reason that if they don't know, that other forces, could be non-human, could be foreign adversary, could be both, are going to win the information war. I have a sneaky suspicion that there is a several decade effort to fracture the United States and the Western liberal alliance, and to undermine it as global leader, and to partition the world into a multi-hemispheric world situation, world power structure, a multipolar world as it's called, because other nation states are seen as more preferable partners for NHI. I think that is a possibility. I have a sneaky suspicion that is at play, and I have a sneaky suspicion as well that part of the kinetic fight by the USG is in resistance to that effort. And that if disclosure doesn't come out, and if the public doesn't understand the nature of the entities and their influence, that they will castigate their own human leadership, that they will side with an NHI proposed leadership, an NHI babysitter, an NHI overlord, or God even, that the faith structures will collapse, and that it will cause mass turmoil, first off, but also that it fundamentally would be a loss for humanity if that scenario took place. So there could be,
because there's no way to
fight.
claw that power back. Once people turn their allegiance over, they've made that switch in their mind, then that's it.
Yeah, I mean, this narrative that abductions are all government, right? They're all my labs.
My labs.
You want to talk about disinformation, folks? That is disinformation. Now, if we're not careful, we could fuel into that. And if disclosure doesn't proceed such that the public realizes, all right, physical alien entities, there is a hostile element, and there has been a non-consensual engagement project or program. The government was complicit, but now, I'm not sure this is totally true, but I would imagine it would be said, they couldn't say no for the following 10 reasons. Okay, maybe 5 of those are true. But in essence, I would argue if there is a fractionalizing of society, of humanity as a species, we have to stay on team humanity. There's no reason or cause to go team NHI, right? And there are many seemingly narrative pushes to get people to go team NHI, and to seriously undermine faith in humanity as a species and human leadership. And so I think this is the new playing field. It is an information playing field, a psi playing field. And this is part of the challenge.
Reed, we've gone over 15 minutes over. I want to be mindful of your time. Thank you so much for carving out 2 hours and 15 minutes to sit down and slow walk us through this. I think it's really critical that we explore this right now. And as I mentioned before, for better or worse, you are the guy right now who is out there at the front of the line, leading the charge on this. And we need more. We need more of this. It's important.
I don't want to be the only one. And I don't know. I seem to be the person people come to when they want to get out of the comfort zone and talk about motives and intentions, activities and agendas. Maybe I'm just the vanguard of the Battle of the Bulge right here, but I need other people to fill the breach, and to start just having the conversation. It's not a threat narrative. That itself is a mischaracterization, and I don't fault anyone for saying those words because I hear them all the time, and I get it. There seems to be a prepackaged narrative on threat. I don't take that position. I take a prepackaged narrative on logic, caution, instinct, responsibility. These are not exotic thoughts, or they do not come out of the military-industrial complex. I mean, it's base human thinking. And I know that because I have so many conversations with average people. And before I even talk about intent, they tell me they're probably here for resources or the planet, or, they're probably here to get something because that's how life works. Everyone has self-interest. And that's how people think. Now, I don't think that is how we should only think, but I think that's a very healthy initial instinctual response. So I think we all need to get on board and help people through that.
If I can, all I want to do is agree with you, to be honest. But I'm, as I said, I'm coming from my own belief that, like, I would struggle to believe that there is any threat whatsoever. However, my actions themselves would not align with that, and I think that's probably what you're getting at. You don't think there's a threat narrative. You also don't think there's a love and light narrative. Well, those narratives exist, but they're not appropriate. And the fact that the response that we have needs to be measured and logical. And I'm in full agreement. And despite my beliefs about the chances of NHI being malevolent or benevolent, my response would probably be the same as yours, which is to put my guard up and to make sure that their intentions are at least in part aligned with the intentions of my own. So whilst we might, on a belief side of things, potentially slightly disagree on certain things, our response definitely 100% is aligned. Absolutely.
Yeah, we're all human, and we should think human and respond
human.
And
human.
you know, I was talking to the director of a UAP organization who's pretty deep in on this, and you know, we were talking about this degradation of human sense of value, and he almost said, you know what, we have been through blood, sweat, and tears for 1 million years to evolve to this point. No one gets to come in at the last moment and say we don't have a right to be here, right? And so, you know, I think we need to kind of like man up a little bit and take ownership of our humanity. We're not perfect, but we have great potential. And as long as we think in those terms, I think we'll think straight on this phenomenon and what other new waves of contact might take place in the future.
Reed, this has been super enlightening. It's been wonderful having you on. The podcast, for people watching at home, Reed's podcast is called Emergent. Episodes premiere Fridays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can watch it on YouTube Live. You can watch it on X or Twitter video stream, Facebook Live. And you can stream the audio version of the podcast anywhere fine podcasts are streamed, but Spotify and Acast also. The website is reedsummers.com. Reed, is there anything else you want to share with the audience before we wrap it up for today?
If you want a deep dive on any of these topics, I do recommend my free course. It's live right now, actually. I'm doing the next live lecture next Wednesday, so you're welcome to jump in. I just launched Forerunner, a platform for people basically to have these conversations, to be forerunners out on the frontiers of the UFO conversation. So check out Forerunner. And with that, thank you, Clint. Thank you, Night Shift, the team Night Shift, the crowd out there, for spending your nights and weekends on this topic. And you know you can't let go. You know you can't turn away. And why is that? It's more than an interest. It's a calling to get involved and to take action, I would say. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, sir. And we will absolutely have you back. I would love to deep dive into AI with you. We didn't even get there. It's just the tip of such a huge iceberg. With that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. People watching at home, if you want to join Pavel, Dan, Xander, and myself, we're going to try to jump onto Discord for a short post-game chit-chat, which we're going to open up to everybody. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing. Don't forget to like and share this video. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think. I'd be very interested to know. After all, the show is about you guys and what you think. We're all in it together. And don't forget to check out Psychoactivo, Others from Another Mother, and of course the Dreamland Motel YouTube channels. Subscribe. Area 52, our friend Chris Ramsey. We'll all be here for you. Thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Until then, keep looking up, guys.